Sir, this premium section is reserved for our established business travelers. I need you to collect your things and move to the economy section immediately. The words did not slip out by accident. They were delivered with cold precision like a policy that had been rehearsed many times before. Michael Reynolds, chief flight attendant on Pinnacle Airlines Flight 723, stood in the aisle with perfect posture, his professionally polite smile never reaching his eyes as he stared down at the man in seat 3A. The passenger, Andre Wilson, looked up from his newspaper, his expression calm but resolute. I have a confirmed reservation for seat 3A. I paid for this seat. I am not moving. Michael's smile tightened the corners of his mouth, straining with barely concealed irritation. He leaned closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a confidential policy update. Sir, this is our premium business section. Perhaps there has been some confusion with your booking. His emphasis on premium hung in the air like a judgment. Around them, other business class passengers glanced up briefly before looking away, their discomfort visible in averted gazes and suddenly fascinating safety cards. A woman in 2B whispered something to her husband. A man in 4C watched with undisguised curiosity. Andre folded his newspaper deliberately, his movements unhurried. There is no confusion. I have a confirmed reservation for seat 3A. Here is my boarding pass. He held out the document, his eyes never leaving Michael's face. Michael barely glanced at the boarding pass. I understand, but we need this seat for one of our priority customers. We will be happy to accommodate you elsewhere on the aircraft. I am not moving, Andre repeated, his voice quiet but firm. This is my assigned seat. Michael's professional veneer cracked slightly. Sir, I strongly suggest you cooperate. We have protocols for passengers who do not understand how things work here. What Michael Reynolds did not know was that in exactly 14 minutes, Andre Wilson would not only refuse to move, but would effectively ground the entire Pinnacle Airlines fleet and launch the biggest discrimination investigation in aviation history. The man he was trying to displace from seat 3A was not just another passenger. He was the founder and CEO of Wilson Global Investments, the largest shareholder of Pinnacle Airlines' parent company, and a man who had spent his life challenging exactly this type of treatment. But for now, Andre sat quietly watching Michael Reynolds make the biggest mistake of his professional career, one that would transform not just a single flight, but an entire industry's approach to dignity and respect. The business class cabin of Pinnacle Airlines Flight 723 from Chicago to San Francisco gleamed under soft lighting. Leather seats reclined in neat rows, the morning sun spilling through half-drawn window shades. Flight attendants moved efficiently through pre-departure routines, their practiced smiles never wavering. It was 9:42 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the atmosphere was charged with the quiet tension that often accompanies prestige. Passengers in tailored suits and designer casual wear settled into their seats, arranging laptops and premium headphones, claiming their space in this exclusive section of the aircraft. Most barely acknowledged the interaction happening in row 3, though a few watched with uncomfortable fascination, witnesses to a confrontation they sensed was about to escalate. Before we continue this true story of power discrimination and justice in the skies, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe that dignity is not something that should be negotiable based on appearance or status, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Now let us get back to what happened on Pinnacle Air Flight 723, where a moment of discrimination was about to change the entire aviation industry forever. The premium cabin of Pinnacle Airlines Flight 723 was the epitome of business travel luxury. Ambient lighting cast a warm glow over polished surfaces. The air carried the subtle scent of leather and premium coffee. Wide, plush seats were arranged in a spacious 1-to-1 configuration, offering each passenger both comfort and privacy. Crystal glasses waited to be filled with pre-takeoff champagne, and branded amenity kits rested on each seat. Yet despite the material comfort, there was a coldness to the environment, an unspoken code about who truly belonged in this space and who did not. Andre Wilson, 48, sat in seat 3A with the quiet confidence of a man who knew his worth without needing to display it. He wore a simple gray button-down shirt, dark jeans that were quality but not ostentatious, and a watch that served its purpose without flash. His short-cropped hair was peppered with distinguished gray at the temples, and his eyes, currently focused on Michael Reynolds, reflected a lifetime of similar confrontations. There were no designer logos emblazoned on his clothing, no signet rings or bespoke accessories to signal wealth. Just a man dressed comfortably for travel whose presence somehow managed to command respect without demanding it. His hands rested calmly on the armrests, neither defensive nor aggressive, simply grounded. Michael Reynolds, 45, stood in stark contrast. His Pinnacle Airlines uniform was immaculate. Every pleat precise, every button secured his posture military straight. With 18 years of experience, he had cultivated a reputation for catering to elite passengers, knowing their preferences before they voiced them, smoothing their journeys with practiced efficiency. His smile appeared and disappeared with strategic timing, and his eyes constantly scanned for status symbols, calculating service priorities based on visible wealth. Right now, those eyes were fixed on Andre with barely concealed disdain. Michael's body language spoke volumes. Slight, lean, backward chin raised a subtle physical distancing that conveyed his judgment more clearly than words. Around them, the other passengers created a silent gallery. A woman in designer loungewear pretended to study her phone while watching the interaction from the corner of her eye. A middle-aged executive adjusted his tie, nervously uncomfortable with the confrontation but unwilling to involve himself. A young professional woman discreetly raised her phone, angling it to capture what was happening without being obvious. The atmosphere was charged with unspoken tension, the kind that arises when an unwritten social contract is being questioned, when someone refuses to play by invisible rules that everyone else has silently agreed to follow. 20 minutes earlier, Andre Wilson had boarded Pinnacle Airlines Flight 723 without fanfare. He moved through the jetway alongside other premium cabin passengers, his carry-on a simple black leather backpack rather than the branded luggage that surrounded him. At the aircraft door, he was greeted with the standard welcome reserved for business class, a smile that dimmed slightly when the flight attendant's eyes scanned his casual attire. Seat, she asked, the customary welcome aboard, noticeably absent. 3A. Andre replied, gesturing to the left. She nodded curtly, a subtle frown forming before she turned to the passenger behind him, Mr. Peterson. So lovely to see you again. Your usual scotch will be waiting after takeoff. Andre navigated to his seat without assistance, noting how flight attendants rushed to help other passengers stow their luggage. He placed his backpack under the seat in front of him, settled in and observed the subtle scrutiny from the crew. Quick glances that assessed and dismissed service offers that never materialized. A flight attendant passing with pre-departure drinks skipped his seat entirely despite making eye contact. Another crew member checking seat belts asked to see his boarding pass again, something not requested of other passengers. Small distinctions, tiny frictions that most would ignore or attribute to coincidence, but Andre noticed them all. He had experienced these micro-judgments throughout his life, first as a scholarship student at elite institutions, then as a young professional ascending through finance ranks, and now, ironically, as a billionaire investor whose appearance did not match assumptions about wealth. He had boarded this specific flight with purpose, part of his company's anonymous audit program. Wilson Global Investments owned significant stakes in multiple airlines, and Andre regularly traveled incognito to experience their service as an ordinary passenger would. Today's flight on Pinnacle had been selected after multiple discrimination complaints had been filed against this route's crew, only to disappear into administrative black holes. As Andre observed the cabin's dynamics, he noticed Michael Reynolds at the center orchestrating the crew's attention toward passengers with visible status symbols. Designer luggage, expensive watches, familiar faces from business magazines. Michael's treatment of those without such markers was perfunctory at best, dismissive at worst. Andre opened his newspaper and settled in, mentally noting each interaction, each subtle distinction in service. He was not looking for trouble, but neither would he ignore it. His experiences had taught him that dignity was not something you waited to be granted. It was something you claimed through calm persistence. He sensed the confrontation coming before Michael ever approached his seat. He had seen the whispered conversation between Michael and another crew member, the glances in his direction, the preparation for what they clearly viewed as an unpleasant task. When Michael finally approached, Andre was ready, not eager for conflict, but unwilling to surrender what was rightfully his. "Where is my seat? I specifically requested 3A, as I always do." The voice cut through the cabin's murmur like a foghorn, commanding attention, not through volume, but through sheer entitlement. Richard Grant, 52, stood in the aisle, his 6'2" frame filling the space with practiced dominance. Everything about him announced wealth and status, from his tailored charcoal suit that likely cost more than most people's monthly mortgage to his platinum cufflinks and handmade Italian leather briefcase. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, and his Patek Philippe watch caught the cabin light as he gestured impatiently. "Mr. Grant, welcome aboard." Michael's entire demeanor transformed his voice, warming with genuine deference. "We are just sorting out a small seating issue. Your usual seat will be available momentarily." Richard surveyed the cabin with the confidence of someone who expected immediate accommodation, his gaze eventually landing on Andre. His expression shifted from impatience to confusion to barely concealed contempt in the span of seconds. "This is my seat," he stated flatly, addressing Andre directly for the first time. It was not a question but a declaration, as if his mere claim superseded any actual assignment. Andre looked up calmly. "According to my boarding pass, it is mine today." Richard blinked, momentarily thrown by the calm refusal. People did not say no to Richard Grant, CEO of Grant Enterprises, and a man whose annual spend with Pinnacle Airlines would fund a small nation's education budget. "There has clearly been a mistake," Richard said, turning to Michael as if Andre were simply a temporary inconvenience to be removed. "I have had this seat on every Tuesday morning flight to San Francisco for the past 3 years. It is in my profile." Michael nodded eagerly. "Absolutely, Mr. Grant. We are working to resolve this immediately. By resolve, you mean you expect me to move despite having a confirmed reservation for this exact seat?" Andre asked, his tone conversational but firm. Richard's jaw tightened. He turned back to Andre, really looking at him this time, taking in the simple clothing, the lack of visible status markers, the calm confidence that somehow irritated him more than any challenge would have. "Do you have any idea who I am?" The question escaped Richard's lips before he could stop it, the classic refuge of the privileged when confronted with unexpected resistance. "I do not," Andre replied honestly. "But I do know that I purchased a ticket for this specific seat, and I intend to stay in it." Richard's face flushed. "I have held platinum status with this airline longer than you have probably owned a suit." The words emerged sharp and dismissive, carrying a weight of assumptions about Andre's background, status, and worth. Several nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably. A young woman in 2B winced visibly at Richard's comment. A business traveler in 4D suddenly became intensely interested in the safety card. "Mr. Grant, please allow me to offer you seat 4A." Michael interjected, desperate to defuse the situation. "It is identical to 3A, and I will personally ensure you receive complimentary premium wine service throughout the flight." "That is not the point." Richard snapped, his voice rising. "My profile clearly states 3A. Always. I should not have to explain this. And my boarding pass clearly shows 3A. Andre countered, his voice still measured despite the escalating tension. "I am not interested in special treatment. I simply expect the airline to honor the seat I purchased. The standoff continued, Richard's presence looming over Andre's seat like a storm cloud, his briefcase clutched in white-knuckled hands, his breathing audibly strained with the effort of controlling his temper. "This is absurd," he finally declared. "I spend over $500,000 annually with Pinnacle. I sit in 3A every Tuesday. Everyone knows this." "I did not," Andre said simply, "and it seems the booking system did not either, since it allowed me to reserve this seat." Richard's expression hardened further, his patience visibly evaporating. He leaned down, voice lowered but intensity increased. "Listen carefully. I do not know who you are or what point you are trying to make, but you are about to learn a very expensive lesson about how the world actually works." Andre met his gaze without flinching. "I am listening. Please continue explaining how the world works." The challenge in those quiet words was unmistakable, and the cabin fell into tense silence as everyone waited for Richard's next move. "What seems to be the problem here?" The crisp, professional voice belonged to Elena Martinez, 36, Pinnacle Airlines cabin manager for this flight. She approached with the measured calm of someone accustomed to mediating conflicts, her uniform pristine, her expression neutral but authoritative. Michael turned to her with visible relief. "Miss Martinez, we have a seating issue. Mr. Grant's profile specifies seat 3A for his regular Tuesday business flights, but it appears the system assigned it to—" He paused, glancing at Andre's boarding pass. "Mr. Wilson instead." Elena assessed the situation with a quick sweep of her eyes, taking in Richard's obvious agitation, Andre's composed stillness, and the attentive audience of nearby passengers. "I see. Mr. Wilson, I apologize for the inconvenience." Her tone was professional, but there was a subtle difference in how she addressed Andre versus the warmth that entered her voice when she continued. "Mr. Grant, we value your loyalty immensely. I am sure we can find a suitable accommodation." Andre noted the distinction immediately. "There is no inconvenience on my part. I am sitting in my assigned seat." Elena's smile remained fixed, but her eyes cooled slightly. "I understand, but we do have some flexibility in our seating arrangements to accommodate our most frequent travelers." "Are you saying that some passengers' reservations are less valid than others?" Andre asked directly. Elena's professional composure flickered momentarily. "Not at all. We simply have protocols for resolving conflicts that prioritize our loyalty program members based on status level and travel frequency." "I see. And where exactly is that policy stated when purchasing tickets?" Andre's question was pointed, but delivered without aggression. "It is understood as part of our service model," Elena replied, less certain now. Richard interrupted, his patience exhausted. "This is ridiculous. I should not have to stand here arguing about a seat that has practically got my name engraved on it." "Mr. Grant is a Diamond Elite member with over 5 million lifetime miles," Michael added, as if this settled the matter entirely. Andre nodded thoughtfully. "Impressive. I respect Mr. Grant's loyalty to Pinnacle. However, that does not override the valid reservation I made for this specific seat." Elena leaned closer to Michael, whispering something inaudible, but Andre caught fragments. "Not worth the scene. Find another solution. PR nightmare if he posts." The whispered conference continued with occasional glances toward Andre that measured and dismissed him. Their assumptions were written in every look. That he would not understand the complexities of airline status hierarchies, that he would eventually yield to authority, that his protests were merely a delayed capitulation. Meanwhile, a few rows back, a passenger named Sofia Ramirez, 29, a junior flight attendant with Pinnacle Airlines traveling off-duty, watched the interaction with growing discomfort. Unlike her colleagues, she recognized the subtle biases playing out in real time, the automatic deference to visible wealth, the dismissal of the less visibly affluent passenger, the unquestioned assumption about who belonged in premium cabins. She caught Andre's eye briefly, an apologetic look crossing her face. He nodded slightly in acknowledgement, sensing an ally among the crew. As the whispered conference continued, Richard's impatience visibly mounted. "I do not have time for this," he announced. "Either resolve it now or I will need to speak with someone who can make decisions." Elena straightened immediately. "Of course, Mr. Grant. Mr. Wilson." She turned to Andre. "We are prepared to offer you compensation for the inconvenience, a voucher for future travel and complimentary premium services in another seat." "Thank you, but I am declining the offer," Andre replied evenly. "I will remain in my assigned seat." Elena's professional smile tightened. "Sir, we are trying to find a reasonable solution here." "The reasonable solution would be to honor the seat assignments your system issued," Andre pointed out. "Mr. Grant could be offered the same compensation package to take another available business class seat." Michael actually laughed at this suggestion, a short, incredulous sound that he quickly suppressed. "That is not how this works," he said, forgetting his customer service voice entirely. "Then please explain exactly how it does work." Andre requested his calm unwavering. "Because from where I am sitting, literally, it appears that some passengers' confirmed reservations are being treated as suggestions rather than contracts." The question hung in the air unanswerable without admitting to the preferential treatment that was the unspoken reality of their service model. Mr. Wilson Elena began again adjusting her approach. "I understand your position, but I would like to offer you something that might make this situation work for everyone." She produced a tablet from her uniform pocket and tapped through several screens. "We can offer you a complimentary upgrade on your next 3 flights with Pinnacle, regardless of fare class. Additionally, we will add 50,000 miles to your loyalty account and provide premium meal service in whichever seat you move to today." She presented this offer with the confidence of someone who believed the problem was simply one of insufficient compensation, that Andre's principles had a price, and she had just met it. Richard stood nearby, arms crossed, watching the negotiation with thinly veiled impatience. His body language communicated absolute certainty that this would be resolved in his favor momentarily. Andre considered the offer thoughtfully. "That is generous," he acknowledged. "However, this is not about compensation or upgrades." "Then what is it about?" Michael interjected, his frustration beginning to show. "We are offering you significant value here." Andre's response was measured. "This is not about a seat. This is about being treated with the same respect as any other paying customer." He gestured subtly around the cabin. "Would you ask any of the other passengers in business class to move because someone else preferred their seat?" Elena hesitated, recognition flickering across her face as she realized the precarious position they were in. "It is a unique situation," she offered weakly. "Is it?" Andre asked. "Or does it happen regularly to passengers who do not look like they belong here according to someone's subjective judgment?" Richard's patience finally snapped. "For God's sake, just take the miles and move. Some of us have actual business waiting in San Francisco, and some of us have principles that are not negotiable." Andre replied, his voice still calm despite the provocation. "This seat is not better than any other business class seat. The issue is being told I need to move simply because someone else wants what I have legally purchased." A few passengers were now openly watching the confrontation, some with uncomfortable expressions, others with growing interest. A woman in her 30s had discreetly positioned her phone to record the interaction, sensing that something significant was unfolding. Elena tried again, her voice lowered as if sharing a confidence. "Mr. Wilson, I understand your position, but this is creating a difficult situation for everyone. Mr. Grant is one of our most valued customers, and we have certain obligations to accommodate his preferences. And what about your obligations to me as stated in your contract of carriage when I purchased this ticket?" Andre countered. Michael's professional veneer cracked further. "Sir, you need to understand that we are trying to be reasonable here, but there are consequences to disrupting the boarding process." The threat, though veiled, was unmistakable. Andre did not blink. "I am not disrupting anything. I am sitting quietly in my assigned seat. The disruption seems to be coming from the insistence that I move despite having a valid reservation." Richard leaned in, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Do you know what I could do to your life with one phone call? Do you have any idea who you are inconveniencing right now?" Andre met his gaze steadily. "No, I do not. And that is precisely the point. In this cabin, we should all be treated according to the same rules regardless of who we are outside it." The statement resonated through the cabin, causing several passengers to exchange glances. The woman filming subtly adjusted her angle to capture more of the confrontation. Elena recognized the deteriorating situation and made one final attempt. "Mr. Wilson, this is your final opportunity to accept our generous offer before we are forced to take more serious measures," such as Andre asked simply. "We have protocols for passengers who refuse to comply with crew instructions," she replied, her tone hardening. Andre nodded thoughtfully. "I see. So sitting in my assigned seat is now classified as non-compliance." The question hung in the air, highlighting the absurdity of their position. "This has gone on long enough." Michael stepped back and lifted his crew phone. "Security to the jet bridge. We have a situation in business class." His voice was clipped professional, but carried an undercurrent of frustration. Elena looked alarmed. "Michael, I am not sure that is. It is necessary," he interrupted firmly. "We cannot delay departure for one uncooperative passenger." Richard nodded in satisfaction, checking his watch pointedly. "Finally, some action." Throughout the exchange, Andre remained remarkably composed. He did not raise his voice, did not make abrupt movements, did not display any of the behaviors that might justify security intervention. Instead, he calmly reached for his phone. "I would like to document what is happening," he stated, activating the voice recorder app, "since it appears I am about to be removed from a flight for sitting in my assigned seat." Michael's eyes narrowed. "Recording crew members is against our policy." "Actually," Andre replied, "I reviewed your policies before booking. There is no prohibition against recording one's own interactions in a public space such as this cabin. I am not recording your operational procedures or interfering with your duties." His knowledge of their policies clearly caught Michael off guard. As security officers surrounded Andre, he felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Not fear for himself, but concern for what his yielding would mean for countless others who would face similar treatment without his resources or platform. For a brief moment, he considered the easier path, moving to another seat, avoiding the confrontation, continuing his audit quietly. But the memory of his mother's funeral and the humiliation he had endured flashed before him. No, he thought, not this time. Within minutes, Daniel Hoffman, 40, head of airport security, appeared at the cabin entrance, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the hyper-vigilant eyes of someone trained to assess threats. Instantly, Daniel surveyed the scene with professional detachment. "What is the situation?" he asked Elena, deliberately keeping his voice neutral. Michael stepped forward. "This passenger," he gestured to Andre, "is refusing to comply with crew instructions regarding seating arrangements." Daniel turned to Andre, who remained seated, hands visible, expression calm. "Sir, the flight crew has authority over all seating assignments. If they have asked you to change seats, you need to comply." "That is not entirely accurate," Andre replied evenly. "The crew has authority to reassign seats for operational safety or balance issues. None of those apply here. I have a confirmed reservation for seat 3A, which I purchased legally. I am being asked to move solely because another passenger wants my seat." Daniel frowned slightly, glancing at Elena for confirmation. "It is a bit more complicated," she hedged. "Mr. Grant is a Diamond Elite member with specific seating preferences in his profile. "I see," Daniel said slowly. "Sir, while I understand your position, if you refuse to comply with crew instructions, we would need to remove you from the aircraft." Andre nodded, his expression serious but not confrontational. "I understand. That is your protocol. However, before we proceed, I would like to clarify, am I being removed because I have violated any actual regulation, or because I am refusing to give up my legally purchased seat to another passenger based solely on his status level?" The question was precisely formulated to highlight the troubling implications, and Daniel recognized the problem immediately. He was being asked to enforce not safety protocols or legal regulations, but a preferential treatment system that had no actual basis in law. Richard interjected impatiently. "This is absurd. I have never experienced such poor service. I will be speaking with Robert about this entire debacle." The casual reference to the airline's CEO by first name was clearly intended to remind everyone of his connections. From her seat several rows back, Sofia Ramirez had been watching with increasing discomfort. Finally, she stood and approached the group, her Pinnacle Airlines ID visible on her lanyard. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I am off-duty, crew." "Maybe I can help." Michael turned to her with visible irritation. "This does not concern you. Please return to your seat." "Actually," Sophia persisted, "I think there is something important we are overlooking. Our policy manual explicitly states that confirmed seat assignments can only be changed for operational safety or balance requirements." She looked directly at Daniel. "Passenger status preference is not listed as a valid reason for involuntary reassignment." Michael's expression darkened. "Sophia, this is not your flight. Return to your seat now." Daniel held up a hand, considering Sophia's point. "Is that accurate? Because I cannot remove a passenger who is not violating any actual regulation." The atmosphere in the cabin had shifted. Other passengers were now openly watching, and more than one phone was recording the interaction. The sense of public scrutiny was palpable, and with it came the uncomfortable realization that this incident could easily go viral if handled poorly. Andre, who had remained calm throughout, spoke again. "I have no desire to create a scene or delay this flight. I simply want to be treated with the same respect as any other passenger who purchased a seat on this aircraft." Daniel nodded slowly, reassessing the situation. "Let me make some calls." As Daniel stepped away to consult with his superiors, Andre reached into his backpack and retrieved a small leather wallet. From it, he produced a platinum card, the highest tier in Pinnacle's loyalty program. "Since status seems to be the central issue here, I should perhaps clarify something," he said quietly, passing the card to Elena. "I have been a Pinnacle customer for over 15 years. That card represents approximately 8 million miles flown." Elena stared at the card in shock, then at Andre, then back at the card. The platinum tier was invitation only, reserved for the airline's absolute top customers. Michael leaned over to verify his expression, shifting rapidly from skepticism to confusion to alarm. "But you did not present this during boarding," Elena stammered. "No," Andre agreed. "Because I should not need to. Every passenger deserves respectful treatment, regardless of status, level, or appearance." Richard, catching sight of the platinum card, faltered visibly for the first time. "Wait, you are a platinum member? Then why are you being so difficult about this? Surely you understand how these things work." "I understand exactly how these things work," Andre replied. "That is precisely why I am taking this stand." The revelation caused a subtle but significant power shift. The crew members exchanged uncertain glances, their confidence in their position clearly shaken. At that moment, a new figure appeared at the front of the cabin. Thomas Bradford, 57, Pinnacle Airlines Vice President of Customer Experience, who happened to be traveling on this flight. Tall, silver-haired, with the practiced charm of a career spent in executive customer relations. Thomas surveyed the scene with visible concern. "I was informed we have a situation," he said, approaching the group with a professional smile that did not reach his eyes. "Perhaps I can help resolve it." Elena quickly briefed him in hushed tones, showing him Andre's platinum card with evident confusion. Thomas turned to Andre, extending his hand. "Mr. Wilson, I apologize for this inconvenience. I am Thomas Bradford, VP of Customer Experience." Andre shook his hand but remained seated. "Mr. Bradford, I appreciate your intervention, but I am concerned about what is happening here." Thomas nodded sympathetically. "I understand completely. Let me assure you that Pinnacle values all our customers, especially our Platinum members. We will make this right immediately." "That is my concern exactly," Andre replied. "The implication that this situation would be handled differently if I were not a Platinum member." Thomas's smile faltered slightly. "Mr. Wilson, while we respect all our customers, we have certain protocols for our most valued partners. And those protocols include displacing other passengers from their assigned seats," Andre asked. Thomas hesitated, caught between corporate policy and the increasingly public nature of this confrontation. He was acutely aware of the recording phones, the attentive audience, the potential PR disaster unfolding. "It is a complex balance," he offered diplomatically. "We try to accommodate everyone's needs while recognizing different levels of loyalty." "Let me be clear," Andre said, his voice still calm but carrying unmistakable resolve. "I am not interested in special treatment because of this card. I am interested in equal treatment for every passenger regardless of status or appearance. The fact that your staff was prepared to remove me from my rightful seat until they saw this card is deeply troubling." Thomas shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the dangerous territory they were entering. "Mr. Wilson, perhaps we can discuss your concerns privately after we resolve the immediate seating issue." "The seating issue is resolved," Andre stated firmly. "I am in my assigned seat where I will remain for this flight." Thomas turned to Richard, who had been watching this exchange with growing realization that he might not win this battle. "Mr. Grant, I sincerely apologize for this situation. If you would allow me, I would like to offer you Seat 1A today, which is actually our premium business position with extra legroom along with complimentary champagne service and a voucher for future travel." Richard, sensing the shifting dynamics and the public attention, reluctantly nodded. "Fine, but this is unacceptable. I have never been treated this way on Pinnacle." The irony of his statement, given what Andre had just experienced, was not lost on the observing passengers, several of whom exchanged knowing glances. As Thomas escorted Richard toward his new seat, the immediate crisis appeared resolved. But Andre knew, as did everyone who had witnessed the exchange, that this was not over. It was, in fact, just beginning. As the cabin settled following the confrontation, Andre remained in Seat 3A, outwardly calm, but inwardly calculating. This was not the first time he had faced such treatment, nor was it an unplanned encounter. The confrontation, while not orchestrated, had been anticipated as a possibility during his anonymous audit of Pinnacle's service culture. Behind his composed expression, Andre's mind worked methodically, assessing the situation not with anger, but with strategic precision. He observed the crew's interactions with other passengers, noting how service patterns shifted depending on perceived status. He watched Michael avoid eye contact while serving his section, noted how Elena checked on Richard 3 separate times in 10 minutes. The cabin crew's behavior told a story beyond this single incident. It revealed an ingrained culture of bias that permeated their service model, likely invisible to those who benefited from it, but glaringly obvious to those on the receiving end. Andre discreetly checked his phone, sending a series of coded text messages to his team at Wilson Global Investments Protocol 7 in progress. Documentation active. Standby for timeline. This was not impulsive anger. It was measured response based on careful preparation. Andre had developed these protocols after decades of similar experiences, not just in air travel, but throughout his journey from a middle-class childhood in Detroit to Harvard Business School to the upper echelons of global finance. He recalled an incident from 15 years earlier when, despite being a successful investment banker, he was removed from first class because the crew could not verify his ticket's authenticity. The humiliation had stayed with him not because he craved luxury, but because the implicit judgment about who belonged represented something deeper about American society. When he founded Wilson Global Investments and began acquiring stakes in major companies, Andre made a private commitment he would use his position not just for profit, but for transformation. His anonymous travel program became a cornerstone of that mission. Flying commercially without announcement or entourage, experiencing service as it truly existed, rather than the choreographed perfection presented to known VIPs. As Flight 723 prepared for departure, Andre's focus shifted temporarily from the crew's behavior to a more immediate concern. Through his window, he noticed something unusual on the wing, a small but distinct streak of fluid near one of the engine housings, catching the morning sunlight with an oily sheen. He pressed the call button, which Michael responded to with visible reluctance. "Yes," Michael's tone remained professionally distant. "There appears to be fluid leaking near the left engine housing," Andre said quietly, pointing out his window. "It might be worth having maintenance check before takeoff." Michael glanced out the window perfunctorily. "That is normal condensation, sir. Nothing to worry about." Andre persisted gently. "I have flown over 8 million miles, Mr. Reynolds. That does not look like condensation to me. The color and viscosity suggest hydraulic fluid." "I will make a note of it," Michael replied dismissively, clearly interpreting the observation as a passenger's attempt to assert knowledge or delay the flight. As Michael walked away without truly addressing the concern, Andre sent another text to his team. Possible maintenance issue identified. Crew dismissive. Documenting timeline. He was not creating problems. He was identifying them. And the airline's response, or lack thereof, was becoming part of a troubling pattern that extended beyond customer service into potential safety implications. As the boarding process completed and the cabin doors closed, Andre continued monitoring the fluid streak on the wing. What had started as a small line had now expanded to a more concerning patch, its amber color distinctly different from normal condensation. Once again, he pressed the call button. This time, Elena responded. "How can I help you, Mr. Wilson?" Her tone was professionally cordial, but guarded. "I am still concerned about that fluid leak near the engine," Andre explained, gesturing toward the window. "It is expanding and appears to be hydraulic fluid rather than condensation." Elena leaned over to look, her expression changing slightly as she registered the amber streak. "I will have the captain informed," she said more seriously this time. Within minutes, Captain Harris's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have been notified of a potential maintenance concern that we need to verify before departure. This is strictly precautionary, but safety is our absolute priority. Our mechanics will perform a brief inspection, which should only take a few minutes. We appreciate your patience." Passengers exchanged glances, some annoyed at the delay, others concerned about the nature of the maintenance concern. Richard, from his new seat in 1A, threw a suspicious glance toward Andre, clearly assuming this was some form of retaliation for the seating dispute. 20 minutes later, James Parker, 44, a senior mechanic, boarded the aircraft and approached the cockpit. After a brief consultation with the captain, he moved through the cabin toward Andre's seat. Sir James said quietly, "Could you show me exactly what you noticed?" Andre pointed out the window to the now significant streak of fluid. "It started as a small line about 40 minutes ago and has been slowly expanding. The color and viscosity suggest hydraulic fluid to me, possibly from the aileron control system based on its location." James's eyebrows rose slightly at the technical assessment. He studied the streak carefully, then nodded. "You are absolutely right. That is hydraulic fluid, and it should not be there. May I ask your background, sir? I spent some time in aerospace engineering before switching to finance." Andre explained simply. James nodded again, then turned to Elena, who had been hovering nearby. We need to deplane immediately and swap aircraft. This is a Class 2 fluid leak affecting critical control surfaces. Elena's professional composure cracked slightly. Is it serious? Serious enough that this aircraft is not flying today, James replied firmly. If it had gone unnoticed during flight. He did not complete the sentence, but his expression conveyed the gravity of the situation. As James confirmed the hydraulic leak's severity, a chill ran down Andre's spine that had nothing to do with the cabin temperature. The realization was staggering. His unwillingness to be moved had not just been about dignity. It had potentially saved everyone on board from disaster. The thought of what might have happened had he yielded his seat made his hands tremble slightly, the only visible crack in his composed exterior all day. The announcement came minutes later. All passengers would need to deplane while a replacement aircraft was prepared. The estimated delay would be at least 2 hours. As passengers gathered their belongings, the mood in the cabin shifted. What had begun as an uncomfortable confrontation about seating had evolved into something far more significant. The passenger they had tried to displace had potentially identified a serious safety issue that might have been overlooked. Thomas Bradford approached Andre as the deplaning process began. Mr. Wilson, I want to personally thank you for your vigilance. Our maintenance team confirms that was indeed a hydraulic leak that could have become critical during flight. I am glad it was identified before takeoff, Andre replied simply. Though I am concerned it was initially dismissed as normal condensation when I first reported it. Thomas's expression tightened. That is troubling. I will need to look into that. May I ask how you were so certain it was hydraulic fluid experience and observation, Andre said. Something that should be valued regardless of who it comes from. The implied connection between the crew's dismissal of his seating rights and their dismissal of his safety concern was not lost on Thomas, whose discomfort was visible. Mr. Wilson, I feel we have gotten off on the wrong foot today. Perhaps while we wait for the replacement aircraft, we could have a more constructive conversation about your experience with Pinnacle. Andre nodded. I would appreciate that opportunity, Mr. Bradford. I have some observations that might be valuable to share. As passengers congregated in the terminal waiting area, Andre and Thomas found a relatively private corner to continue their conversation. Mr. Wilson, first let me reiterate my apology for your experience today. Thomas began, his tone professionally contrite. It is clearly not representative of the service Pinnacle aspires to provide. Is not it, though? Andre asked quietly. Because from my observation, it is precisely representative of how your crew treats passengers based on appearance, rather than actual status or, more importantly, basic human dignity. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. We have strict non-discrimination policies. Policies on paper mean nothing when the culture contradicts them, Andre interrupted gently. Let me share something with you. He recounted an incident from 20 years earlier, how as a young black professional on his way to his mother's funeral, he had purchased a first-class ticket to ensure he could rest during the long flight after days without sleep. The gate agent took one look at me, young black dressed in clothes that were not designer brands, and immediately questioned my ticket. Are you sure you are at the right gate? She asked. I showed my boarding pass. She called her supervisor. They made me step aside while other passengers boarded, staring at me like I was trying to sneak into a space I had not paid for. Thomas listened, his discomfort visible, but his attention genuine. When they finally let me board, Andre continued. Someone had already been given my seat. I was moved to the back of the plane between two passengers. I arrived at my mother's funeral exhausted, humiliated, and late. I am truly sorry to hear that happen to you, Thomas said. It was not just that incident, Andre explained. It is the pattern, the constant small indignities, being followed in first-class lounges, having flight attendants repeatedly check my boarding pass while white passengers walk past unchallenged, being served last or sometimes not at all. Each individual incident seems small enough to dismiss, which is exactly what happens when they are reported. Thomas nodded slowly, recognition dawning in his eyes. I promised myself that day at my mother's funeral that if I ever had the power to change this system, I would, Andre continued. Not just for me, but for everyone who has been looked at and immediately judged as not belonging. He paused, considering how much to reveal. Mr. Bradford, I do not typically announce this when I travel, but I believe context is important for our discussion. I am Andre Wilson, founder and CEO of Wilson Global Investments. Thomas's eyes widened as recognition set in. Wilson Global Investments was a $170 billion asset management firm with significant holdings across multiple industries, including Thomas suddenly realized Pinnacle Airline's parent company. We own approximately 37% of Pinnacle's outstanding shares. Andre continued calmly, making us your largest single shareholder. Thomas paled visibly. I had no idea. That is intentional, Andre explained. I travel anonymously through our corporate accountability program. I experience your airline as an ordinary passenger would, not as someone receiving the choreographed VIP treatment that masks the real culture of your organization. Mr. Wilson, I do not know what to say, Thomas stammered. You do not need to say anything right now, Andre replied. But you do need to listen. What happened today is not an isolated incident. Based on our audit program across multiple flights and routes, it is a pattern that reflects a deeply entrenched cultural problem at Pinnacle. He withdrew a tablet from his backpack and opened a secure folder. These are documented incidents from just the past 6 months, all filed through proper channels, all effectively buried in your customer service system. Thomas reviewed the data with growing alarm. Dozens of incidents where passengers of color or those without visible status markers were treated with dismissiveness, suspicion, or outright hostility. This is not just a customer service issue, Andre continued. It is a safety issue, as evidenced by how quickly my concern about the hydraulic leak was dismissed. When crew members make judgments based on appearances rather than substance, they create blind spots that can have serious consequences. I understand Thomas said his professional veneer cracking to reveal genuine concern. What do you want from us, Mr. Wilson? Andre's expression remained calm but determined. I want accountability and transformation, not just a PR statement or a one-day training session. Real, measurable change in how Pinnacle treats every passenger regardless of appearance, status, or background. Thomas nodded slowly, the full implications of the situation becoming clear. This was not just about one uncomfortable incident or one disgruntled passenger, even a VIP passenger. This was about a major shareholder who had identified fundamental problems in the company's operations culture and safety protocols. We should continue this conversation with Robert Thomas, said, referring to Pinnacle's CEO. He needs to hear this directly. I agree, Andre replied, because what happens next will depend entirely on how seriously your leadership takes these issues. As Andre and Thomas continued their conversation in the terminal, the ripple effects of the incident were already spreading through Pinnacle's corporate structure. At Wilson Global Investments headquarters, Diana Foster, 42, Andre's chief of staff, had received his coded text messages and immediately activated their response protocol. A dedicated team gathered in the crisis management room, multiple screens displaying social media feeds, news alerts, and internal communications channels. Andre has initiated Protocol 7 on Pinnacle Flight 723, Diana announced to the assembled team. We have confirmation of discriminatory treatment followed by identification of a safety issue that was initially dismissed. The flight has been grounded for maintenance. The team moved with practiced efficiency, each member understanding their role without need for detailed instruction. This was not their first airline audit intervention, though it appeared to be potentially the most significant. Social media monitoring shows 3 passenger videos already uploaded reported a young analyst tracking real-time mentions, 2 on Twitter, 1 on Instagram. Early comments are overwhelmingly supportive of the passenger being pressured to move, though they do not yet know it is Andre. Legal team prepare documentation packages on all incidents we have recorded on Pinnacle over the past 24 months, Diana instructed. Communications draft 3 scenario responses based on how Pinnacle leadership reacts. Regulatory liaison alert our contacts at the FAA and DOT that we may be filing formal reports depending on Pinnacle's response. While the Wilson Global team mobilized, a parallel crisis was unfolding at Pinnacle Airline's corporate headquarters. Robert Lawson, 55 CEO of Pinnacle, was in the middle of a routine board meeting when his executive assistant urgently interrupted with a tablet displaying the viral videos beginning to circulate. Robert watched with growing alarm as the confrontation played out. The dismissive treatment of Andre, the preferential accommodation of Richard, the initially dismissed safety concern that turned out to be legitimate, and finally the revelation rippling through aviation industry circles that the passenger involved was none other than Andre Wilson. "Get Thomas Bradford on the line immediately," Robert instructed, his voice tight with controlled panic. "And clear my schedule for the rest of the day." Within minutes, he was speaking with Thomas via secure video link, the gravity of the situation becoming increasingly clear. "He is there with you now," Robert confirmed, glancing nervously at the board members who remained in the room, all watching with concerned expressions. "Yes," Thomas replied. "And Robert, this is not just about today's incident. Wilson Global has been conducting systematic audits of our service for months. They have documented evidence of a pattern of discriminatory treatment and safety protocol violations." "How bad?" Robert asked simply. Thomas's expression conveyed the severity. "Bad enough that as our largest shareholder he could force significant changes in leadership if we do not address it properly." Robert closed his eyes briefly, processing the implications. "Tell him I am flying out personally. I will be there in 3 hours. In the meantime, ground all aircraft in the fleet for immediate safety inspections." "All aircraft?" Thomas echoed, stunned by the scale of the response. "All of them," Robert confirmed grimly. "If one critical safety concern was dismissed due to bias today, there could be others we have missed. We cannot take that chance." As Robert ended the call, he turned to address the silent board members. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation that requires immediate attention. Andre Wilson of Wilson Global Investments has identified serious cultural and safety issues within our operation. He was subjected to discriminatory treatment on one of our flights today, and when he reported a hydraulic leak, his concern was initially dismissed due to the same biases." The room erupted in concerned murmurs. "I have ordered a fleet-wide grounding for safety inspections," Robert continued, raising his hand to quiet the protests. "Yes, it will be expensive. Yes, it will disrupt operations. But the alternative could be catastrophic, both from a safety perspective and a corporate governance standpoint." He turned to the company's chief communications officer. "Prepare a statement acknowledging the incident, the fleet grounding, and our commitment to addressing both the safety and cultural issues identified. No spin, no corporate jargon, just straightforward accountability." As the Pinnacle corporate machine whirred into crisis response mode, Diana Foster received another message from Andre: meeting with CEO in 3 hours. Full documentation needed. Prepare for Plan A implementation if response is inadequate. Plan A was the most comprehensive intervention in their corporate accountability playbook, a complete leadership overhaul and cultural transformation program that Wilson Global would require as a condition of maintaining their investment. The stakes could not be higher for both Andre personally and for the thousands of employees and millions of passengers whose lives would be affected by what happened next. Back at the gate area, the situation was evolving rapidly. As passengers from Flight 723 milled about, waiting for updates, airport security personnel approached Andre and Thomas, led by a grim-faced Michael Reynolds. "Mr. Bradford," one of the officers began, "we have received a report of a passenger making false claims about aircraft safety to disrupt operations." Thomas looked stunned. "What?" "That is completely inaccurate." The maintenance team confirmed the hydraulic leak was real and serious. Michael stepped forward, his expression a mixture of defiance and desperation. The passenger made these claims only after being involved in a seating dispute. It appears to be retaliatory behavior designed to delay the flight. Andre observed the situation with remarkable composure, noting how quickly the narrative was being rewritten to cast him as the problem rather than the biased treatment or the actual safety issue. Officer Andre said calmly, "The maintenance log will confirm that James Parker, your senior mechanic, classified this as a Class 2 fluid leak affecting critical control surfaces. That is an objective fact, not a passenger claim." The security officer hesitated, clearly caught between conflicting accounts. "Sir, we need to take statements from everyone involved. Please come with us to the security office." "Am I being detained?" Andre asked directly. "Not at this time, but—" "Then I am declining to leave this area," Andre stated firmly. "I have done nothing wrong, and the maintenance records will confirm that my safety concern was legitimate and potentially life-saving." By this point, several passengers from the flight had gathered around, witnessing this new development. Maria Gonzalez, 34, who had been seated in 4B and witnessed the entire initial confrontation, stepped forward. "Are you seriously trying to remove the man who potentially saved all our lives?" she demanded loudly. "I was sitting right behind him. He was treated horribly by your staff just because he did not look like he belonged in business class. Then he spotted a dangerous leak that your crew dismissed until a mechanic confirmed he was right." Her outburst caught the attention of more passengers who began to gather around. Many had their phones out recording the escalating situation. Michael paled, realizing the public relations disaster was growing exponentially. "This is an internal airline matter," he attempted, but his voice lacked conviction. "No, it is not," came another passenger's voice. "It is a public safety matter, and we all witnessed it." An elderly white man in 5C who had watched the entire confrontation unfold leaned forward. "Young man," he said to Andre, his voice cracking with emotion, "I have been flying for 50 years, and I have seen this happen too many times. Thank you for standing your ground." From across the aisle, a middle-aged woman nodded in agreement. "My son experiences this kind of thing all the time," she added. "People need to see this." The security officers exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly recognizing they were being drawn into a situation that was rapidly becoming untenable. Meanwhile, social media was already ablaze with video clips from the initial confrontation. Seat 3A was trending nationally, along with #Pinnacle Airlines and #Flying While Black. News outlets had picked up the story and were contacting passengers for first-hand accounts. Thomas Bradford, recognizing the rapidly deteriorating situation, stepped between Andre and the security officers. "There has been a misunderstanding. Mr. Wilson is not only a valued customer, but a significant Pinnacle stakeholder who has identified an important safety issue. There will be no further security involvement here." Michael's expression shifted from defiance to confusion to dawning horror as he processed Thomas's words. "Particularly significant Pinnacle stakeholder." "Stakeholder," he repeated weakly. Thomas nodded grimly. "Michael, I suggest you return to the crew area immediately. We will discuss your actions later." As Michael retreated, the security officers also withdrew, leaving Andre, Thomas, and a crowd of attentive passengers in an impromptu circle at the gate area. Andre checked his phone, noting the viral spread of the videos and the fleet-wide grounding order that had just been announced. The situation had escalated beyond anything Pinnacle could contain or control. The moment of truth had arrived. Andre Wilson stood slowly, his movement deliberate and unhurried. The gate area fell silent, as if the air itself was waiting for what would come next. Passengers who had witnessed the earlier confrontation watched intently, many still recording with their phones. "My name is Andre Wilson," he began, his voice carrying clearly without being raised. "I am the founder and CEO of Wilson Global Investments." A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd as people registered the name. some immediately recognizing one of the wealthiest investment managers in America, others quickly searching on their phones and reacting with widening eyes. Wilson Global Investments owns 37% of Pinnacle Airlines' outstanding shares, making us the largest single shareholder. I sit on your parent company's board of directors. The revelation landed like a thunderclap. Thomas Bradford, despite having learned this information earlier, still looked physically shaken by the public declaration. Nearby, Michael Reynolds had frozen in place, the color draining from his face, as the full implications of his earlier behavior registered. From his position near the customer service desk, Richard Grant straightened abruptly, his expression morphing from irritation at the delay to something approaching panic. He began edging toward the back of the crowd, suddenly eager to distance himself from the situation he had helped create. I boarded this flight as myself, not as a VIP, not as an investor, but as a regular passenger who paid for his seat. Andre continued, his tone measured and deliberate. And in doing so, I have discovered exactly how Pinnacle treats people when you do not recognize their name or value their appearance. He turned slightly, addressing the gathered passengers directly now. What happened today is not just about a seat or about me personally. It is about a culture that judges people's worth based on appearances rather than character or contribution. A culture that dismisses legitimate concerns from those deemed unimportant. A culture that today nearly resulted in a serious safety incident because a valid warning was ignored based on who delivered it. Phones raised higher as more passengers recorded his words, the moment clearly historic in its implications. Today, I was asked to give up my rightfully purchased seat simply because someone else, someone who looked the part, wanted it. When I refused, I was threatened with removal from the aircraft. When I identified a potentially catastrophic hydraulic leak, my concern was dismissed as an attempt to cause trouble. Andre reached into his jacket and withdrew a small black card with the Wilson Global Investments emblem. This is not about a seat, ladies and gentlemen. This is about a fundamental failure in how we treat each other, how we judge worthiness, and how those judgments create blind spots that can have serious consequences. He turned back to Thomas. Mr. Bradford, your CEO, Robert Lawson, is currently flying here to meet with me. In the meantime, Pinnacle has grounded its entire fleet for safety inspections, a prudent decision given what we discovered today. But the issues go deeper than mechanical concerns. They reach into the core culture of your organization. Michael Reynolds, who had been trying to make himself invisible at the periphery of the crowd, suddenly found himself directly in Andre's line of sight. Mr. Reynolds. Andre addressed him directly, causing him to stiffen. Your actions today reflected not personal failings, but a cultural environment that rewarded certain behaviors and penalized others. You are not the problem. You are a symptom of a much larger issue that Pinnacle must address. Michael swallowed hard, unable to meet Andre's gaze, the public acknowledgement of his role in this situation clearly overwhelming. Richard Grant, having failed in his attempt to slip away unnoticed, now found himself cornered by reporters who had begun arriving at the gate area, drawn by the viral videos and breaking news about the fleet grounding. Mr. Grant, is it true you demanded another passenger seat, despite his valid reservation? One reporter called out. No comment, Richard muttered, raising his hand to block cameras as he pushed through the crowd toward the exit. Andre watched this brief exchange with a thoughtful expression before turning back to address the gathered passengers once more. To everyone affected by today's disruption, I apologize. But I believe that what we are witnessing, what we are part of right now, is an important moment of accountability and potential transformation, not just for Pinnacle Airlines, but for how we address these issues throughout our society. A spontaneous round of applause erupted from many in the crowd, passengers nodding in agreement and respect. Thomas Bradford stepped forward, visibly processing the seismic shift that had just occurred. Mr. Wilson, on behalf of Pinnacle Airlines, I want to publicly apologize for your experience today. It falls far short of our stated values and the service we aspire to provide to all passengers. Andre nodded acknowledgement but did not interrupt. I commit to you and to everyone present that this will be addressed comprehensively, not with token gestures or empty statements, but with meaningful structural and cultural changes. Thomas continued, his voice growing firmer as he spoke. As the impromptu gathering began to disperse, journalists approached Andre for comments, but he politely declined immediate interviews. This is not about publicity, he explained. It is about creating lasting change. I will have more to say after meeting with Pinnacle's leadership. The reveal, both of Andre's identity and of the deep-rooted issues within Pinnacle's culture, had irrevocably changed the dynamic. What had begun as one passenger's stand against discriminatory treatment had evolved into a watershed moment for corporate accountability and cultural transformation. While the human drama unfolded in the terminal, a more technical but equally significant situation was developing on the tarmac. James Parker, the senior mechanic who had confirmed Andre's concerns about the hydraulic leak, emerged from a lengthy inspection of the aircraft tablet in hand, and expression grave. He approached the growing group of airline officials who had gathered near the gate, including Thomas Bradford and several other Pinnacle executives who had rushed to the airport as news of the situation spread. We have completed our initial assessment, James announced, his voice carrying the weight of professional concern. Mr. Wilson's observation was completely accurate. We identified a Class II hydraulic fluid leak from the left aileron control system. He turned his tablet to show them detailed photographs of the leak. Based on the volume and rate of fluid loss, this would have become critical approximately 40 minutes into the flight, potentially resulting in partial loss of control authority at cruise altitude. The implications hung in the air, unspoken, but understood by everyone present. This was not a minor maintenance issue. It was a potentially catastrophic situation that had been identified not through standard procedures, but by a passenger whose concerns were initially dismissed. How was this missed during pre-flight checks? Thomas asked, breaking the tense silence. James shifted uncomfortably. That is what is most concerning. It appears the leak began during the boarding process, which means it was developing in real time. Our standard exterior walk-around had been completed before it became visible. He paused, then added the crucial point. This is exactly why we train all crew members to take passenger observations seriously, regardless of who reports them. Sometimes they are the only ones who might notice a developing situation. As if to underscore the gravity of the situation, a team of maintenance personnel was visible through the terminal windows surrounding the grounded aircraft with inspection equipment and documentation tablets. Andre, who had been quietly observing this exchange, stepped forward. If you had moved me as demanded, no one would have spotted that leak until it was too late. Would they? James shook his head slowly. Probably not. The passenger in 4A would not have had the same visual angle, and based on the leak's progression rate, by the time it might have been visible from other windows, we would have been at altitude. The realization visibly shook the assembled Pinnacle officials. The discrimination incident, serious as it was from a customer service and ethical perspective, had now taken on life-or-death implications. We have initiated fleet-wide inspections focusing specifically on hydraulic systems. James continued. I will be honest. This is not an isolated maintenance concern. We have had 3 similar incidents reported in the past year, all of which were initially classified as passenger misidentification before being confirmed by maintenance teams. Thomas's expression darkened. Were any patterns identified in those cases? Who reported them? How they were handled? James consulted his tablet. I cannot speak to the passenger demographics, but I can tell you that all 3 were initially dismissed by crew before maintenance intervention was finally approved. He hesitated, then added, There is a tendency to take certain passengers' concerns more seriously than others. It is not official policy, but it is there. The parallel to the discrimination Andre had faced was unmistakable. Biases were not just creating uncomfortable experiences or inequitable treatment. They were creating dangerous blind spots in safety protocols. Andre observed the realization dawning across the faces of the Pinnacle executives. This is precisely why addressing these issues is not just about customer satisfaction or public relations, he said quietly. It is about removing the filters that prevent you from hearing critical information from all sources. Thomas nodded, visibly processing the full dimensions of what they were confronting. We need to completely rethink our approach, not just to customer service, but to safety reporting and how we filter and prioritize information. As the group continued their discussion, a new figure approached. Robert Lawson, CEO of Pinnacle Airlines, having arrived earlier than expected on a private flight. His expression was grave as he took in the assembled group, the grounded aircraft, and the maintenance team swarming around it. "Mr. Wilson," he said, extending his hand. "I am Robert Lawson. It appears we have significant issues to discuss." Andre shook his hand firmly. "We do indeed, Mr. Lawson. About much more than just a seat assignment." The scene shifted to Pinnacle Airlines corporate headquarters, where an emergency board meeting had been convened in the wake of the rapidly unfolding crisis. The boardroom, typically a bastion of corporate serenity with its polished mahogany table and skyline views, now hummed with anxious energy. Large displays around the room painted a troubling picture. Viral videos of the confrontation playing on major news networks. Pinnacle's stock price dropping in real time as markets reacted to the fleet-wide grounding and social media metrics showing the explosive growth of hashtags like #Seat3A and #Pinnacle discrimination. Robert Lawson stood at the head of the table, tie loosened and expression grim as he addressed the assembled board members and executive team via video conference, having just concluded his initial meeting with Andre Wilson at the airport. "The situation is unprecedented in scope and seriousness," he began without preamble. "What began as a discriminatory incident involving our largest shareholder has escalated into a safety crisis affecting our entire fleet." He gestured to one of the screens where maintenance reports were streaming in. "Preliminary inspections have already identified 2 additional aircraft with hydraulic issues, similar to what Mr. Wilson observed, issues that might have gone unnoticed without this scrutiny." A murmur of concern rippled through the room. "But the more fundamental issue," Robert continued, his voice growing more serious, "is that both the initial discrimination and the dismissed safety concerns stem from the same root problem, a corporate culture that judges value based on appearance rather than substance." He clicked to a new slide showing Andre's documentation. Dozens of recorded incidents across Pinnacle's network where passengers had experienced biased treatment, dismissal of concerns, or outright discrimination. "Wilson Global Investments has been conducting anonymous audits of our service for months," he explained. "They have documented a pattern that none of our internal metrics captured, or perhaps that we chose not to capture. The data is irrefutable, and as our largest shareholder, they have the leverage to demand immediate changes." The chief legal officer leaned forward. "What exactly are they asking for, Robert?" "Nothing less than a complete transformation of our corporate culture and accountability systems," Robert replied, "and I am recommending we embrace it fully." This statement triggered immediate reactions around the table, some nodding in agreement, others looking alarmed at the implications. "Mr. Wilson and his team are on their way here now," Robert continued. "They have prepared a comprehensive reform proposal that they are prepared to implement, with or without our current management team's cooperation." The implied threat was clear: resist the changes, and Wilson Global could use their shareholder position to force a leadership overhaul. The chief financial officer spoke up, always focused on the bottom line. "What is the financial impact of this fleet grounding? We are talking millions in disruption costs, compensation claims, not to mention the stock price decline." Robert's expression hardened. "Jennifer, I want to be absolutely clear. We just discovered multiple aircraft with potentially catastrophic hydraulic issues that our standard procedures missed. The financial impact of addressing that now is nothing compared to what we would face if even one of those aircraft had experienced control failure at altitude." He let that sink in before continuing. Moreover, the discrimination issue is not just morally reprehensible, it is legally actionable and potentially devastating to our brand in the long term. So while I appreciate the financial concerns, they are secondary to the fundamental issues of safety and ethical conduct we are confronting today. The boardroom fell silent as the gravity of the situation settled over the group. At that moment, the boardroom doors opened and an assistant announced the arrival of Andre Wilson and his team from Wilson Global Investments. Andre entered calmly, followed by Diana Foster and several other executives and analysts. They carried tablets and documentation folders but moved with the quiet confidence of people who knew they held the upper hand. "Thank you for accommodating this impromptu meeting." Andre began taking the seat offered at the table. "I believe we all understand the gravity of what has happened today." Robert nodded. "We do. And I want to reiterate our sincere apology for your experience as well as our gratitude for your identification of the hydraulic issue." "This is not about me personally," Andre clarified. "It is about addressing structural issues that affect thousands of employees and millions of passengers. The discriminatory treatment I experienced is symptomatic of deeper problems that manifest not just in customer experience but in safety practices as well." Diana distributed tablets to each person at the table. "We have prepared a comprehensive analysis based on 6 months of anonymous audits across Pinnacle's network. The data reveals consistent patterns of discriminatory treatment, particularly toward passengers of color, those dressed casually, and those who do not visibly signal wealth or status. As the board members reviewed the data, their expressions ranged from shock to dismay to defensive skepticism. More concerning, Andre continued, "We have documented multiple instances where safety concerns raised by these same lower priority passengers were dismissed or delayed, exactly as happened today. The correlation is undeniable and deeply troubling." Robert, to his credit, did not attempt to minimize or deflect. "What do you propose, Mr. Wilson?" Andre nodded to Diana, who activated a presentation on the main screen titled "The Dignity Protocol Structural Reform for Pinnacle Airlines." "We are proposing a comprehensive transformation, not a Band-Aid solution," Andre explained. "This is not about sensitivity training or diversity statements. It is about rewiring the fundamental systems and incentives that govern how your employees make decisions." The presentation outlined a sweeping set of changes, new accountability metrics that tracked equal treatment rather than just premium customer satisfaction, anonymous testing protocols to identify and address bias, restructured reporting systems for safety concerns that eliminated hierarchical filtering, and perhaps most significantly, a complete overhaul of the corporate culture that had allowed these issues to flourish. "Implementation begins immediately," Andre stated firmly. "Wilson Global will provide oversight and resources, but make no mistake. This transformation must be embraced and led by Pinnacle's own leadership to succeed." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "Which brings us to the critical question. Are you prepared to lead this change authentically? Or should we be discussing leadership transitions as part of this process?" The question hung in the air, its implications clear to everyone present. This was not a negotiation. It was a turning point that would determine the future of Pinnacle Airlines and potentially reshape standards across the entire industry. As the presentation concluded, Andre rose from his seat, his presence commanding the room despite his quiet demeanor. This was the moment of truth, the ultimatum that would determine whether Pinnacle Airlines transformed under its current leadership or faced a more dramatic overhaul. "Let me be absolutely clear about where we stand." Andre began, his voice measured but firm. "As your largest shareholder, Wilson Global Investments has both the right and the responsibility to ensure that our investment aligns with our values and serves the public good. What we have uncovered at Pinnacle violates both principles." He gestured to the screens still displaying the documented pattern of discrimination and safety concerns. "This is not a single incident that can be blamed on a few employees. It is evidence of fundamental flaws in your corporate culture, training incentives, and accountability systems. Robert Lawson nodded soberly. We understand the severity of the situation, Mr. Wilson. Good, Andre replied. Then you will understand why we are requiring immediate comprehensive action, rather than the usual corporate response of committees, studies, and gradually implemented changes. Diana activated a new slide titled Non-Negotiable Terms, and the room fell silent as the executives read the list. Complete overhaul of customer service training and policies with equal treatment standards, regardless of appearance, status, or background. Independent Oversight Committee for Discrimination Complaints with direct reporting to the Board of Directors. Consequences for discriminatory behavior at all levels, including executive leadership, new emergency inspection protocols, and safety reporting systems that eliminate hierarchical filtering. Public transparency about these reforms, including regular progress reports. You have 24 hours to accept these terms in their entirety, Andre stated. If you decline or attempt to negotiate watered-down versions, Wilson Global will immediately call for a board vote to remove current management and implement these changes under new leadership. The room remained silent, the enormity of the ultimatum sinking in. This was not a PR crisis to be managed with careful statements and minimal action. It was an existential moment for the company's identity and future. Robert cleared his throat. And if we accept these terms, what role will Wilson Global play in the implementation? We will provide resources, expertise, and oversight, Andre explained. But to be successful, this transformation must be owned and led by Pinnacle itself. These changes cannot be imposed from outside. They must become part of your DNA. He paused, then added, This is not punishment, Mr. Lawson. It is an opportunity for Pinnacle to become a leader in an industry that has struggled with these issues for decades. You can set a new standard that others will be forced to follow. Robert exchanged glances with his executive team, a silent communication passing between them. May we have the room to discuss this privately? Andre nodded. Of course. Diana will remain available to answer any specific questions about the implementation requirements. We will reconvene in 1 hour. As Andre and most of his team exited, the Pinnacle executives huddled in intense discussion. Their company's future hung in the balance caught between the comfort of familiar patterns and the discomfort of meaningful change. 1 hour later, they had their answer. Robert Lawson stood as Andre re-entered the boardroom. Mr. Wilson, we have reviewed your terms, consulted with our key stakeholders, and reached a unanimous decision. He paused, his expression resolute. Pinnacle Airlines accepts your terms without modification or reservation. We recognize that this is not just the right business decision, but the right ethical decision. Andre studied him carefully, looking for any sign of reluctance or insincerity. Finding none, he extended his hand. Then we move forward together. Implementation begins immediately. Robert shook his hand firmly. I give you my personal commitment that these reforms will be implemented fully and transparently. Pinnacle will emerge from this crisis as a better company, one that truly values every passenger equally. Actions will speak louder than words, Andre replied. But I appreciate the commitment. Now let us discuss next steps. The meeting transitioned into planning mode, with teams assigned to each area of reform. What had begun as a confrontation was evolving into a collaboration, albeit one with clear accountability and non-negotiable standards. Outside the boardroom, news of Pinnacle's fleet-wide grounding and the viral discrimination incident had spread across all major media outlets. The aviation industry watched with bated breath, recognizing that what happened at Pinnacle would likely set new expectations for every airline. The transformation had begun, not with press releases or corporate statements, but with a single passenger who refused to give up his seat and in doing so changed an entire industry's trajectory. Within hours of the agreement between Andre Wilson and Pinnacle's leadership, The consequences for those directly involved in the discrimination incident began to unfold. Michael Reynolds, the chief flight attendant who had initiated the confrontation, was placed on immediate administrative leave pending a formal review. Security escorted him from the crew area, his company ID and access cards confiscated. As he walked through the terminal, head down and shoulders hunched, he passed dozens of crew members watching in silence. Some sympathetic, others relieved that accountability had finally arrived. Richard Grant faced consequences of his own, though not from Pinnacle directly. Videos of his entitled behavior had gone viral, with his demands and dismissive comments toward Andre replayed millions of times across social media platforms. By evening, Grant Enterprises' public relations team was in full crisis mode as partners and clients began questioning their association with a company whose CEO exhibited such behavior. Richard issued a hasty statement claiming he had been misunderstood and that he valued diversity, but the damage was done. His company's stock dropped 7% by market close, and 3 major clients suspended their contracts pending review. Thomas Bradford, Pinnacle's VP of Customer Experience, found himself in a precarious position. Having witnessed the discrimination firsthand, yet initially hesitating to intervene decisively, Robert Lawson placed him on administrative leave as well, though with a different trajectory. Thomas Robert explained during a private meeting, "You failed to stop this situation when you should have. But you also recognized the problem and showed willingness to address it once the facts became clear. We are suspending you for 30 days, after which you will have a choice: resign with a standard severance package, or return in a new role, focusing specifically on implementing our equality reforms." Thomas nodded solemnly. "I would like the opportunity to be part of the solution." Among the crew members witnessing these events, Sofia Ramirez, the junior flight attendant who had attempted to support Andre by citing company policy, found herself unexpectedly summoned to Robert Lawson's temporary office at the airport. Ms. Ramirez Robert began when she arrived, clearly nervous about meeting with the CEO. "I understand you were the only crew member who spoke up about our actual policies regarding seat assignments." "Yes, sir," she confirmed hesitantly. "I just thought it was important to follow our actual rules, not unwritten ones." Robert nodded approvingly. "That is precisely the kind of integrity we need more of at Pinnacle. Mr. Wilson specifically mentioned your intervention, and we would like to offer you a new position." Sophia looked surprised. "What kind of position?" "We are establishing a new customer experience task force to lead our equality reforms, and we want you to head it. You demonstrated the courage to speak up when it was not easy or popular. That is the quality we need leading this transformation." Later, when Andre asked Sophia why she had risked her position to speak up, her eyes reflected a personal pain. "My brother was removed from a flight last year after someone complained about him," she explained quietly. "He was in his assigned seat, but the crew never even checked his boarding pass. They just assumed he was wrong. He missed our mother's surgery because of it. I promised myself I would never be part of doing that to someone else." Later that evening, Andre met privately with Sophia to explain why he had recommended her for this critical role. "You were the only one who looked uncomfortable with injustice," he told her simply. "That is the first qualification for creating change, the ability to recognize wrong even when it is normalized by those around you." Sophia's eyes glistened with unexpected emotion. "I almost did not speak up," she admitted. "I was afraid of the consequences." "But you did it anyway," Andre replied. "That is courage. Not fearlessness, but action despite fear. Build your team with people who share that quality, and you will transform Pinnacle from the inside out." As day turned to evening, the ripple effects continued spreading. James Parker, the mechanic who had confirmed the hydraulic leak, received a call from Robert Lawson personally thanking him for his professionalism and asking him to lead a new technical safety initiative focusing on improved reporting protocols. Throughout these immediate consequences, Andre remained largely in the background, allowing Pinnacle's leadership to take visible ownership of the changes. This was not about public vindication or personal recognition. It was about ensuring that the transformation took root authentically within the company's structure. In a brief statement to the press, he said, "Only what happened today revealed problems that have existed for too long, not just at Pinnacle but throughout the aviation industry. The real measure of success will not be today's actions, but the lasting changes that follow." The decision to ground Pinnacle's entire fleet of 173 aircraft across 60 destinations was unprecedented in scale for a non-weather, non-regulatory event. As the announcement rippled across airports nationwide, the initial passenger reactions ranged from frustration and anger to concern about the underlying safety implications. Ladies and gentlemen, we regret to inform you that Pinnacle Airlines has temporarily suspended all flight operations for mandatory safety inspections. Airport announcements echoed throughout terminals. This is a precautionary measure following the identification of potential maintenance concerns. All passengers will be accommodated on partner airlines or provided hotel accommodations as needed. Behind these carefully worded announcements lay a massive logistical operation. Pinnacle's operations center transformed into a crisis management hub, with staff working frantically to reroute passengers, coordinate with partner airlines, and manage the inspection process for each grounded aircraft. Robert Lawson had made a crucial decision in the framing of the grounding absolute transparency about both the safety concerns and the discriminatory incident that had revealed them. "We are not hiding behind vague operational issues," he instructed his communications team. "We tell the truth. We are inspecting every aircraft because a passenger's legitimate safety concern was initially dismissed due to bias and when finally examined proved to be serious. We own this completely." This approach, while potentially damaging in the short term, set the tone for the accountability that would follow. By the second day of inspections, the decision was vindicated in ways no one had anticipated. Maintenance teams discovered 3 additional aircraft with similar hydraulic issues that might have gone undetected without the comprehensive review. One was classified as potentially critical, a sobering reminder of what might have happened if Andre's observation had been ignored entirely. Andre visited the maintenance facility where the inspections were being conducted, accompanied by James Parker. As they walked among the grounded aircraft, James explained the technical findings with growing concern. "These issues would not necessarily have been caught by our standard pre-flight checks," he admitted. "They are the kind of developing problems that might only become visible during particular phases of flight preparation or under specific conditions, which is exactly why passenger observations should be taken seriously regardless of who reports them," Andre noted. James nodded soberly. "The system we have been using prioritizes maintenance checks based partly on who reports issues. Platinum members' concerns get immediate attention, while others might be logged for later follow-up or dismissed as passenger misunderstanding. And that creates dangerous blind spots," Andre concluded. "Potentially fatal ones," James agreed grimly. This realization became the foundation for the Wilson Dignity Protocol, a comprehensive new approach to both customer service and safety reporting that eliminated bias-based filtering of information. The protocol established clear standards for how all passenger concerns would be documented, evaluated, and addressed with accountability measures that prevented discrimination at every level. Working with civil rights organizations and aviation safety experts, Pinnacle developed a training program unlike anything previously seen in the industry. Rather than superficial diversity training, it focused on concrete practices and measurable outcomes. Anonymous testing programs where individuals of different backgrounds would report identical issues with response times and resolution quality tracked for disparities. Removal of visible status indicators from initial customer service interactions, ensuring that concerns were evaluated on merit rather than perceived passenger value. Direct reporting channels for discrimination or safety concerns that bypassed hierarchical filtering. Accountability metrics built into employee evaluations with consequences for biased treatment. Technical validation processes for all reported safety concerns, regardless of source, James Parker was appointed to head the new Maintenance Transparency Initiative, which incorporated these principles into technical operations. The old approach was efficient but dangerously flawed, he explained during a staff briefing. We streamlined by prioritizing certain inputs over others, creating blind spots that could have had catastrophic consequences. The new protocol takes slightly more resources but eliminates those life-threatening gaps. As the inspections continued and the new protocols took shape, a remarkable shift began occurring among Pinnacle's workforce. Initial resistance gave way to engagement as employees recognized that these changes were not just about avoiding discrimination claims, they were about fundamentally improving safety and service quality for everyone. In a company-wide address, Robert Lawson summarized this emerging understanding. What we are learning is powerful. Dignity is not an upgrade you can purchase. It is the baseline everyone deserves. And when we fail to provide it, we create risks that extend far beyond customer satisfaction. 3 weeks after the incident on Flight 723, Pinnacle Airline's corporate headquarters hummed with unprecedented activity. The 15th floor, previously executive offices, had been transformed into the headquarters for the Dignity Protocol implementation team. A diverse group of employees from across the company working alongside external experts to restructure Pinnacle's operations from the ground up. Sophia Ramirez, now Director of Customer Experience Transformation, led a morning briefing with a confidence that belied her recent promotion from junior flight attendant. We are entering Phase 2 implementation today, she announced to the assembled team. The preliminary results from Phase 1 are encouraging but highlight areas needing additional focus. Behind her screens displayed data from the first wave of reforms, anonymous testing results showing how passenger concerns were being handled across different demographic groups, response time analytics and customer feedback metrics sorted by multiple factors. We are seeing a 78% improvement in equal response times to passenger requests regardless of appearance or status, she noted. That is significant progress, but we are aiming for 100% parity. The implementation process had been methodical and comprehensive, touching every aspect of Pinnacle's operations. First, the Wilson Dignity Protocol established clear standards for all customer interactions, eliminating the unwritten hierarchies that had previously governed service delivery. Every employee, from gate agents to pilots, underwent intensive training, focusing not on abstract concepts, but on specific behaviors and measurable outcomes. Second, new reporting systems were developed that tracked and analyzed treatment patterns across passenger demographics, identifying potential bias hotspots before they became problematic. Unlike traditional customer satisfaction metrics that focused primarily on premium passengers, these systems weighted all passenger experiences equally. Third, accountability mechanisms were built into every level of the organization, from frontline employees to executive leadership. Performance evaluations now included specific metrics related to equal treatment with consequences for violations that could not be dismissed or buried. Fourth, an anonymous testing program was implemented with individuals of different backgrounds presenting identical scenarios to evaluate response consistency. These results were shared transparently throughout the organization, creating awareness of unconscious biases without targeting specific employees. Throughout this transformation, Andre Wilson remained involved but deliberately in the background, allowing Pinnacle's own team to take ownership of the changes. His role was advisory rather than directive, providing resources, expertise, and occasional course correction when implementation drifted from core principles. This has to become Pinnacle's transformation, not Wilson Global's mandate, he explained to Diana during a progress review. For lasting change, they need to internalize these values, not just comply with external demands. The impact extended beyond customer-facing operations to safety protocols as well. James Parker's Maintenance Transparency Initiative fundamentally redesigned how safety concerns were reported, evaluated, and addressed. The new system is elegantly simple, James explained during a demonstration for aviation regulators. Every reported concern, regardless of source, enters the same validation queue. No filtering based on who reported it, no prioritization based on status. Each report is evaluated solely on its technical merits. This approach had already proven its value. During the fleet-wide inspection, 4 additional maintenance issues were discovered that might otherwise have been missed. None immediately critical, but all potentially serious if left unaddressed. Robert Lawson, who had initially feared the financial impact of these sweeping changes, found himself pleasantly surprised by early indicators. While the fleet grounding had indeed been costly in the short term, passenger confidence in Pinnacle's commitment to safety and equality was translating into stronger booking numbers than projected. It turns out that people appreciate knowing an airline values their safety and dignity equally regardless of what seat they are in, he observed during an executive committee meeting. Perhaps most remarkably, the cultural shift within Pinnacle was becoming visible even to outside observers. Crew members reported feeling empowered to prioritize safety and fair treatment over status-based expectations. Gate agents described relief at having clear protocols rather than unwritten rules about who deserved preferential treatment. One flight attendant summarized it during a training session. Before we had the official rules, we were taught, and the real rules we actually followed based on who seemed important. Now there is just one set of rules and they apply to everyone. It is actually easier. 6 weeks after the incident, Pinnacle's entire fleet had returned to full operations, now operating under the new protocols. The transformation was not complete. Cultural change never happens overnight. But the foundation had been firmly established for a fundamentally different approach to aviation service and safety. What began as a single confrontation on Pinnacle Airlines Flight 723 quickly expanded beyond one company's internal reforms to influence the entire aviation industry. The ripple effects were both immediate and far-reaching, touching everything from regulatory approaches to customer expectations. 2 months after the incident, industry leaders gathered in Washington, D.C. for an emergency summit on equality in aviation services, a meeting that would have been unthinkable before Andre Wilson's stand in seat 3A. Representatives from every major U.S. carrier, along with regulatory officials and consumer advocacy groups, convened to discuss the implications of what was now simply called the Pinnacle incident. What happened on that flight has forced a long overdue conversation, acknowledged the FAA administrator in her opening remarks. The connection between discriminatory practices and potential safety implications raises regulatory questions that we must address industry-wide. Behind the scenes, other airlines were scrambling to evaluate their own vulnerabilities. Delta, United American, and smaller carriers launched internal audits of their service protocols and safety reporting systems, suddenly alert to the dangers of bias-based filtering of information. TechCrunch published an article that captured the industry's reaction. Pinnacle's near miss has CEOs trembling. How many other airlines are ignoring safety concerns based on who reports them? The story's potential liability implications sent shockwaves through corporate boardrooms and legal departments across the aviation sector. Meanwhile, Richard Grant faced consequences that extended far beyond the original confrontation. Grant Enterprises lost 3 major clients within weeks of the incident, and shareholders began questioning his leadership after his behavior became public. Eventually, he was forced to step down as CEO, issuing a public apology that acknowledged his actions had been indefensible and contrary to the values our company claims to uphold. His public statement included a remarkable admission. I have spent my career assuming certain privileges were my right, rather than recognizing them as preferential treatment others do not receive. That mindset led me to behavior that was not just unprofessional, but fundamentally wrong. Congressional hearings on discrimination in commercial aviation soon followed, with Andre Wilson providing testimony about the broader implications of what he had experienced. This is not about one flight or one company, he explained to the House Transportation Committee. It is about recognizing that when we create 2-tiered systems based on appearance status or background, we do not just damage human dignity, we create dangerous blind spots that can have life-threatening consequences. His testimony led to proposed legislation requiring airlines to implement bias-free safety reporting systems with clear accountability measures, a bill that quickly gained bipartisan support in a normally divided Congress. Consumer advocacy groups launched campaigns encouraging passengers to document and report discriminatory treatment, creating public databases that ranked airlines on equality metrics. #Remember Seat 3A became shorthand for standing against discrimination in any context, expanding far beyond the aviation industry to become a cultural touchpoint. 4 months after the incident, the transformation had advanced far enough for Pinnacle to go public with a comprehensive case study of their reforms. Rather than hiding the discrimination that had occurred, they openly acknowledged it and detailed the structural changes implemented in response. "We are sharing this not because we are proud of what happened," Robert Lawson explained during the press conference, "but because we believe the lessons we have learned can help create safer, more equitable practices throughout the industry." The case study became required reading in business schools and corporate training programs, analyzed not just for its approach to diversity issues, but for its demonstration of how overlooked biases create organizational blind spots with potentially catastrophic consequences. By the 6-month mark, 5 other major airlines had implemented their own versions of the Wilson Dignity Protocol, recognizing that consumer expectations had fundamentally shifted. Equality in treatment was no longer seen as a nice-to-have customer service goal, but as a fundamental safety and operational requirement. The FAA revised its guidance on safety reporting systems, explicitly addressing the need for bias-free evaluation of all safety concerns regardless of source. The new standards incorporated many elements directly from Pinnacle's reformed protocols. Throughout this industry-wide transformation, Andre Wilson maintained his focus on implementation rather than publicity. He declined most interview requests, instead directing attention to the structural changes being made and their measurable impact on both equality and safety outcomes. This was never about one passenger or one incident, he explained in a rare statement to the press. It was about identifying a fundamental flaw in how we assess human value and recognizing the hidden risks created when we filter information based on who provides it rather than what it contains. Andre Wilson walked through Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 3 quietly dressed in simple jeans and a gray button-down shirt similar to what he had worn during the now famous confrontation. No executive entourage accompanied him, no special treatment marked his passage through the busy terminal, exactly as he preferred it. He was booked on Pinnacle Airlines Flight 723 again, the same route, the same flight number, though this time deliberately seated in economy class rather than business. This was not a publicity stunt, but part of his ongoing commitment to experiencing airline service as it actually existed, rather than as it was presented to VIPs. As he approached the gate, he was surprised to see a familiar face, Michael Reynolds, the former chief flight attendant who had initiated the original confrontation. Michael was not in uniform but dressed in civilian clothes waiting near the boarding area with visible nervousness. When he spotted Andre, he straightened and took a deep breath before approaching. "Mr. Wilson," he began hesitantly. I heard you might be on this flight. I wanted to speak with you if you are willing." Andre regarded him thoughtfully, then nodded. "Of course. I am working as a diversity trainer now." Michael explained, the irony of this career shift evident in his expression. "After what happened, after what I did, I was offered a choice: termination or education. I chose education." He paused, visibly struggling with his words. "I spent 20 years in this industry thinking I was just following protocol, just doing my job. I never called myself biased, but watching those videos of how I treated you, hearing my own words." Andre listened without interrupting, his expression neutral but attentive. "I want to apologize," Michael finally said. "Not for PR purposes or because I am required to, but because I was wrong. The system was wrong, yes, but I was the one who enforced it. I was the one who looked at you and made assumptions based on nothing but appearance. I appreciate your apology, Andre replied after a moment. But this was never about individual blame. It was about recognizing and changing patterns that existed throughout the organization. That is what I am trying to help with now, Michael explained. I share my experience, what I did wrong, how I rationalized it, what it took to make me see it. It seems to resonate because I am not an outside consultant telling them about bias in the abstract. I am someone who lived it and enforced it for years without recognizing what I was doing. Andre nodded thoughtfully. That is valuable. Change does not come from pretending these biases do not exist. It comes from honest acknowledgement and structural reform. As boarding began, Andre was recognized by several passengers and crew members. Some smiled in acknowledgement, others approached to express quiet thanks, a few even asked for photos or handshakes. He responded to each with the same humble grace, neither seeking nor avoiding the attention his actions had generated. When he reached his economy seat, he found himself next to Maria Gonzalez, the passenger who had spoken up in his defense during the attempted removal at the gate. She greeted him with surprise and warmth. "I did not expect to see you in economy," she admitted, "especially not on this route again." Andre smiled. "I fly as I always have, sometimes in business if the schedule requires it, often in economy. The point was never about which cabin deserved better treatment, but that every passenger deserves equal respect regardless of where they are seated or how they are dressed." As the flight progressed, Andre observed the crew's interactions carefully, noting the visible changes in how they approached their duties. Gone were the obvious deference patterns based on perceived status. Instead, each passenger interaction followed the same respectful protocol with needs addressed based on their substance rather than who expressed them. One particularly telling moment came when a passenger in economy reported a concerning sound from near the wing. Rather than dismissing the observation, the flight attendant immediately thanked him, documented the concern, and conveyed it to the cockpit. The captain personally came to speak with the passenger, listen to the sound, and explain the non-critical nature of what he was hearing. No drama, no dismissal, just proper procedure applied equally regardless of the passenger's status or location in the aircraft. When the flight landed in San Francisco, Andre found Sofia Ramirez waiting at the gate, now in her role as Director of Customer Experience Transformation. "How was the flight?" she asked, falling into step beside him as they walked through the terminal. "Noticeably different," he replied. "Not perfect, but the fundamental shift is visible in how crew members approach their interactions. They are focused on the substance of requests rather than who is making them." Sophia nodded, pleased, but not complacent. "We are tracking measurable improvements across all our metrics. Response time equity is now at 91% parity, regardless of passenger demographics or cabin class. Safety concern reporting has increased by 32%, with validation protocols ensuring we are not creating false alarms." "And the crew's response?" Andre asked. "Initially resistant, then cautiously accepting, now increasingly supportive," Sophia reported. "Many have shared that it has actually reduced their stress. They are no longer trying to navigate unwritten rules about who deserves preferential treatment. There is just one standard that applies to everyone." As they reached the exit, Sophia added a final observation. "The most meaningful change is not in our metrics or protocols. It is in the conversations happening in crew rooms and training sessions. People are openly discussing biases they did not previously recognize, acknowledging patterns they participated in without questioning." Andre nodded thoughtfully. "That is how real change begins. Not with policies alone, but with awareness that leads to different choices." The grand ballroom of the Washington Hilton buzzed with anticipation as the aviation industry's top executives, regulators, and safety experts gathered for the annual Aviation Safety Summit. This year's agenda was dominated by a topic that would have seemed out of place in previous years: the safety implications of bias lessons from the Seat 3A incident. On stage, a panel of experts including Robert Lawson, Sophia Ramirez, James Parker, and representatives from the FAA and consumer advocacy groups prepared to discuss the industry-wide changes implemented in the wake of Andre Wilson's stand against discrimination. Andre himself sat quietly in the audience, deliberately choosing an inconspicuous seat toward the back rather than the VIP section reserved for featured speakers and industry leaders. He had declined an invitation to join the panel, believing the transformation should be represented by those implementing it daily rather than the catalyst who initiated it. Robert Lawson opened the discussion with remarkable candor. 6 months ago, Pinnacle Airlines nearly experienced what could have been a catastrophic incident, not because of mechanical failure alone, but because our culture systematically dismissed safety concerns based on who reported them rather than their substance. He paused, allowing the gravity of that statement to register. The hydraulic leak identified by Mr. Wilson might well have progressed to control system failure at altitude had it gone unaddressed. And it nearly went unaddressed precisely because we had created a culture where certain voices were valued over others. The data presented during the panel was compelling, since implementing the Wilson Dignity Protocol safety concern reporting had increased by 46% across Pinnacle's network. Of those reports, 12% identified legitimate issues requiring maintenance intervention. 3 critical issues had been caught early that might otherwise have been missed. Customer satisfaction scores had improved across all passenger demographics. Employee retention had increased, with many citing the more equitable culture as a key factor. James Parker shared the technical aspects of the reformed safety reporting system. We have eliminated all filtering based on who reports concerns. Every observation enters the same validation queue, evaluated solely on technical merit. This has closed dangerous gaps in our safety net. Sophia described the cultural transformation within Pinnacle. We have moved from a 2-tiered service model based on status to a single standard of dignity applied equally to all passengers. The result is not lower service quality for premium customers, but more consistent quality for everyone. From his seat in the audience, Andre observed not just the panel but the reactions of industry leaders around him. Some nodded in recognition, others took notes with focused attention. A few shifted uncomfortably as the implications for their own operations became clear. During the Q&A session, an unexpected participant approached the microphone. Richard Grant, the passenger who had demanded Andre's seat during the original confrontation. His public fall from grace had been well documented, but his presence at this aviation safety conference was surprising. "I am not here as a CEO anymore." Richard began, his voice lacking its former arrogance. "I am here as someone who was part of the problem. My behavior that day was not an anomaly. It was the culmination of years of expecting and receiving preferential treatment based on nothing but status." The room fell silent, attendees leaning forward to hear this unprecedented public acknowledgement. "What I have come to understand," Richard continued, "is that my sense of entitlement was not just rude or unpleasant, it was potentially dangerous. By demanding that airline staff prioritize my preferences over proper procedures, I was contributing to a culture where actual safety concerns could be dismissed based on who raised them." His gaze found Andre in the audience. "I have spent my career focused on efficiency and results, often at the expense of equity and safety. I am now working with several airlines to help them identify similar blind spots in their operations. Not because I am an expert on equality, but because I am unfortunately an expert on the entitled mindset that creates these dangerous gaps." This public redemption was not part of any planned narrative, but it highlighted how deeply the Pinnacle incident had penetrated the industry's consciousness. The conversation had evolved beyond customer service quality to recognize the critical safety implications of bias-based filtering of information. After the conference concluded, Andre found himself approached by numerous industry leaders, seeking his insights on implementing similar reforms in their operations. He directed them instead to Sophia James and the implementation team who had turned principles into practical reality. The concepts are not complicated, he explained to one particularly persistent CEO. Equal dignity for all passengers, equal evaluation of all safety concerns regardless of source, accountability for biased treatment at every level of the organization. The challenge is not understanding what needs to change, it is committing to actually changing it. As he prepared to leave, Andre was stopped by a young black pilot in a regional airline uniform. "Sir," she said, extending her hand, "I just wanted to thank you. I have been in this industry for 8 years, and for the first time, I am seeing meaningful changes in how we approach both passenger treatment and safety protocols." "The changes are not my doing," Andre replied. "They are happening because people like you are implementing them daily, often without recognition." She smiled. "Maybe, but it took someone refusing to move from seat 3A to make the rest of us realize we could stand our ground too." 1 year to the day after the incident on Pinnacle Flight 723, a different kind of gathering took place at the Museum of Flight in Seattle. Unlike the industry conferences and regulatory hearings of the previous months, this event celebrated the establishment of the Dignity in Aviation Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting equality, safety, and accountability across the transportation sector. The foundation's mission extended beyond addressing discrimination to focus on the critical intersection between equal treatment and operational safety. Its founding principle, displayed prominently at the entrance to the event, captured this connection. When we filter information based on who provides it rather than what it contains, we create blind spots that can have devastating consequences. Andre Wilson, who had provided the initial funding for the foundation but deliberately positioned himself as a board member rather than its public face, watched with quiet satisfaction as the organization took its first public steps under the leadership of a diverse team of aviation professionals, safety experts, and civil rights advocates. The centerpiece of the launch was the announcement of the Dignity Scholarship Program, an initiative providing financial support and mentorship for underrepresented students entering aviation, aerospace engineering, and transportation safety fields. 20 students had been selected as the inaugural cohort, each receiving full tuition and guaranteed internships with participating airlines and manufacturers. Maria Gonzalez, the passenger who had spoken up during Andre's confrontation and who now served as the foundation's director of community engagement, introduced the scholarship recipients to enthusiastic applause. "These young people represent not just the future of aviation," she explained, "but a future where safety and dignity are recognized as inseparable values rather than competing priorities." Among the industry leaders in attendance was Thomas Bradford, the former Pinnacle VP who had initially hesitated during the confrontation, but ultimately became a committed advocate for reform. After serving his suspension, he had indeed returned to help implement the changes, eventually leaving Pinnacle to join the foundation as its chief programs officer. "The transformation we have witnessed over the past year extends far beyond Pinnacle Airlines," Thomas observed during a panel discussion. "Every major carrier has implemented some version of the Wilson Protocol, not just as a public relations move, but as a fundamental safety enhancement. The impact was indeed industry-wide and measurable. The FAA had revised its safety reporting guidelines to explicitly address bias-free evaluation protocols. 7 major airlines had restructured their service models to eliminate status-based discrimination in basic treatment. Safety concern reporting had increased across the industry by 38%, with validation protocols ensuring efficient filtering based on technical merit rather than source. Consumer advocacy groups reported significant decreases in discrimination complaints across all measured carriers. The phrase "Remember Seat 3A" had transcended its aviation origins to become cultural shorthand for standing against discrimination in any context. It appeared on everything from social media hashtags to corporate training materials to academic case studies. As the formal program concluded, Andre found himself approached by a young black aviation student who had received one of the Foundation's scholarships. Mr. Wilson, the young man, began tentatively. "I just wanted to tell you that your story changed my path. I was considering leaving my aviation program after some discouraging experiences. But seeing what happened, how you stood your ground without losing your composure, how you created change rather than just complaint, it showed me that I belong in this industry too." Andre studied him thoughtfully. "What is your name?" "Michael. Michael Turner." "Well, Michael, remember this. It was not about the seat. It was about setting a standard that outlives us. Whatever position you eventually hold in this industry, you will have opportunities to uphold that standard for someone else." The young man nodded, his expression reflecting both understanding and commitment. As the event wound down, Andre stepped away from the crowd to a quiet corner of the museum that overlooked the Seattle skyline. The vista of mountains, water, and sky reminded him of the view from Seat 3A 1 year earlier, the perspective that had allowed him to spot not just a hydraulic leak, but a fundamental flaw in how human value was assessed in the air and on the ground. James Parker joined him at the window, now serving as the Foundation's technical safety director, after leaving Pinnacle to help expand the reforms industry-wide. "Quite a year," James observed simply. Andre nodded. "More progress than I expected, honestly, though still much work to be done." The technical protocols were the easy part, James agreed. Changing minds about who deserves to be heard, that is the work of generations. "But it is happening," Andre replied. "Not because of grand statements or policies alone, but because people throughout the industry are making different choices every day, choosing to see the person rather than the appearance, to hear the content rather than the source." As they stood in contemplative silence, a Pinnacle Airlines jet lifted off from the nearby airport, its path carrying it over the museum before banking toward its destination. Both men watched its ascent with the knowledge that the passengers aboard, regardless of their appearance, status, or background, were now flying in an aircraft where their observations would be valued equally should they notice something amiss. "Sometimes," Andre said quietly as the plane disappeared into the clouds, "the most powerful move you can make is to stay exactly where you belong." Andre Wilson boarded Pinnacle Airlines Flight 209 from Seattle to Boston on a crisp autumn morning 2 years after the incident that had transformed the aviation industry. As always, he traveled without announcement or entourage, dressed in simple business casual attire that offered no obvious indicators of his wealth or position. This time, however, something was noticeably different. As he presented his boarding pass to the gate agent, he received the same professional greeting extended to the passengers before and after him. No suspicion, no extra scrutiny, no subtle shift in tone based on appearance or assumed status. He made his way down the jetway alongside a diverse flow of travelers, observing the crew's interactions with professional interest. At the aircraft door, a flight attendant welcomed him with the same warm efficiency she offered to each passenger, her focus on service rather than assessment. Taking his seat in 4C, Economy Plus for this flight, Andre settled in and observed the cabin dynamics with practiced attention. What he witnessed was subtle but profound: crew members moving through the aircraft with consistent professionalism, regardless of which cabin they served. Passenger requests being addressed based on content rather than who made them. A genuine sense of calm competence rather than the hierarchical tension that had once been standard. Midway through boarding, a young family with 2 small children took their seats across the aisle. As the parents worked to settle the excited youngsters, one of the children noticed something outside the window. "Mommy, what is that dripping under the wing?" the little boy asked, pointing. Without hesitation, the nearby flight attendant knelt to his eye level. "Thank you for noticing that," she said genuinely. "You have very good eyes. Would you mind showing me exactly where you see it?" The child pointed again, and the attendant looked carefully before responding. That is actually normal condensation from the air conditioning system, but I appreciate you telling us. It is very important that passengers like you let us know when you see anything unusual. That helps keep everyone safe. The simple exchange carried profound meaning for Andre. 2 years earlier, the same observation might have been dismissed without investigation if it came from a child or someone deemed unimportant. Now it received respectful attention regardless of its source, exactly as safety protocols demanded. As the flight progressed, Andre overheard a situation several rows ahead that further illustrated the transformation. A passenger in standard economy was expressing concern about a medication that needed refrigeration. "I understand this is important to you," the flight attendant responded. "Let me check what options we have available." She returned minutes later with a solution, explaining it with the same professional courtesy that would once have been reserved for premium cabins. No dismissiveness, no suggestion that such accommodations were beyond the passenger's station, just problem-solving focused on the need rather than the status of who expressed it. Midway through the flight, Andre was surprised when the captain emerged from the cockpit and made her way directly to his seat. "Mr. Wilson," she said quietly, extending her hand. "Captain Rivera. I hope you do not mind my intrusion, but I wanted to thank you personally." Andre shook her hand, slightly puzzled. "Thank me," she smiled. "I was a first officer at Pinnacle 2 years ago. The changes that followed your stand in Seat 3A transformed more than just passenger experience. They revolutionized our safety culture, our reporting systems, everything about how we operate." Her expression grew more serious. 3 months ago, a catering staff member, someone who would have been ignored in the old system, reported an unusual odor near the avionics bay on one of our aircraft. Because of our new protocols, that report received immediate technical validation rather than being dismissed based on who made it. "What was found?" Andre asked. "An electrical short that could have become catastrophic during flight," she replied simply. That catering staff member received the same recognition a senior pilot would have for identifying a critical safety issue. "That is your legacy, Mr. Wilson." After thanking him again, she returned to the cockpit, leaving Andre to reflect on the ripple effects of that single moment of refusing to move from Seat 3A. The transformation was not perfect or complete. Nothing involving human behavior ever could be, but the fundamental shift was undeniable. As the flight began its descent into Boston, Andre gazed out the window at the landscape below, considering how systems changed when people refused to accept injustice. Not through grand gestures or passionate speeches, but through quiet, principled stands at pivotal moments. The flight attendant's voice came over the intercom, thanking passengers for choosing Pinnacle and reminding them to remain seated until the aircraft reached the gate. And as always, she concluded, "We appreciate your attention to safety. If you notice anything of concern during our arrival, please alert any crew member immediately. Your observations help ensure everyone's well-being." It was a small addition to the standard announcement, but it represented a fundamental shift in perspective, an acknowledgement that safety depended on valuing input from everyone, not just those deemed important by arbitrary standards. As Andre deplaned among the flow of diverse passengers, all treated with the same professional courtesy, he reflected on how a moment of refusing to move had created momentum for lasting change. The phrase "Remember Seat 3A" had entered the cultural lexicon not as a reference to privilege, but as a reminder that dignity was not negotiable, and that sometimes the most powerful action was simply staying where you belonged. If you have ever been made to feel that you did not belong somewhere you had every right to be, this story was for you. And if you have never experienced that feeling, remember that each of us has opportunities every day to either reinforce or dismantle the barriers others face. What seat are you refusing to give up in your own life? What standard are you setting that might outlive you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. When we stand firm with dignity rather than anger, with principles rather than ego, we create ripples that extend far beyond our individual experience. Ripples that can transform not just a flight, but an entire industry's understanding of who deserves to be heard. Like this video if you believe in equal treatment for all, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage that change the world.
Ага. Что за хуйня? Алло? О, бля. Вот же. Пойдем.
Что такое, пацаны? Соля, ты с этим разберешься, да?
Типа на
1х005. Ну, наверное, на 1 лучше.
А есть этот?
Через пару минут медиапик.
Давайте, смотри, сейчас
Мы втроем выйдем, я поменяюсь с попыткой. Надо, чтобы пары тоже туда играли.
Так мы в пятером мы играем, правильно?
кто-то один на замене сразу. 5+1 играем.
Я хочу, чтобы мы втроем один раз.
Сейчас посмотрим результат. Давайте так. Давайте поймем, кто даст нормальный результат сейчас. У нас сейчас... Сейчас нужен результат, Саш. Там минуты ничего не решится. Сейчас, значит, 10 минут играть. Выходите, хорошо, решайте сами, давайте. Если вы знаете больше, давайте. А чего больше? Я понял. Не понял, что 15.
Ты проверяешь, где меньше пик, или это выбираешь. Работа.
Блогер предприниматель Алексей Напаревский. Вратарь команды Павел Ковалев. Состав такой. Ворота.
Есть, брат.
Равш! Равш! Остановить и запустить F.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, просим вас занять футболистов скамейки, зрителей.
Есть, пацаны?
Зрительные места.
Норм? Все, норм. Все, от души. Могу, хочешь забери.
Не мешай. Все.
0,5.
От мяча белый, от мяча.
Итак, команда играет медиапик неделями составами 10 минут. Победитель медиапика. Запишем гол на счет своей команды.
Что он делает?
Мы
Где он?
Переступах.
Старого выпустить, пожалуйста.
Это как он пришел бегает?
Снова Бэйм, справа
Оп, оп,
фланга.
оп, оп, оп.
Доработал.
Хорошо, Равша, хорошо, молодец, держи. О, оп, бля. Делай,
Почему
делай.
так хорошо в футбол играет Равшан? Почему мы об этом узнаем только сейчас?
Куда ты дергаешься?
Не дергайся, ладно.
Ударом, ударом! Ударом! Можно, Юра.
Есть свисток. Розыгрыш. Выходит под правую. Собирает вокруг себя Никита и Бейпа.
А, тут еще стоит.
Смотри, ударом! Ударом!
Нормально.
Бля, я не могу понять, что
Раф,
происходит.
включайся.
Бля. Как снимать? Вы что, гоните? Просто на 0,5?
Стана с пяткой.
Да,
Это
типа спина, бля.
было весьма хитро. Бэйп сохраняет мяч.
Все, пацаны, не буду трогать. Вот.
Когда он Бэйпа мяч под правой, следует удар.
Тобой что?
Не хотят, чтобы я раскрылся.
Судейский свисток молчит, пошла контратака Литенерджи.
На один, все, понял.
Ворота пустые, и Фархад перестарался.
Бля, включайся, Равшан!
Не кричи, да, любимый.
Медиапик играется без офсайда.
Равшан! Сзади идет, сзади!
Хорошо.
Газ, газ! Иди!
Пошел, Раф, пошел, пошел!
Бля, забегай, ну быстрее.
Лёш, вперед, блядь, прими, надо!
Открывайся, Раф. Ну.
Тин уходит от Никита. Передачу партнера. Бэйп неправильно вводит мяч из аута. Владение переходит в Литенерджи.
Лёш, вперед иди!
Хорошо.
По глазам Равшана видно, что он ждал передачу.
Да пошел задницу,
Он все сделал сам.
Посмотрел, как запыхается по-братски?
Да, брат.
1-0 Литенерджи.
Он умер. Жилетку снять. Ты просто стоишь, мы тебя снимаем. Некрасиво, блин. Я как пройду. А, не проблема, брат. Да, давай, давай.
Опа! Пошел! Да, бля! Сука, пузатый хрен. Чисто мама вышел побегать.
Это про меня?
Раф! Забегай!
Чуть было не привозит.
Брат, он сдох, все.
Под ногами, понял, работает, он вот так.
Животом. Да. Бегай, Раф! Пошел, пошел! Равшан, беги! Раф!
Сейчас голос посадит. Ай, блин! Ничего себе! Бля, сильный подкат был. Крепаните по-братски. О, хорошо. Хорошо сейчас. Где он?
Еще 5
Равшан, дышать,
минут, 10
дышать!
секунд играет.
Не пропускай. Бля, открывайся, Раш, ну по-братски. Бля. Успокойся, братишка. Ой-ой-ой-ой. Чуть-чуть.
Рикошета мяч чуть
Ну, брат, он старый просто. Поймите его.
в дальний угол Тудронс. Есть пространство, но есть развязанный шнурок. Передача на Карена.
Ой-ой-ой.